We came to rest on a corner next to a modest restaurant specializing in hamburgers. Jack got out of the vehicle and walked into the restaurant. I followed him. We sat at a booth next to the window, and both of us ordered a hamburger, milkshake, and French fries. I still loved a good burger. Jack, we need to go see those Dyson Spheres. I keep thinking about them. They're remarkable feats of engineering for vacation vehicles, but let's go another time. I have something else in mind. You know, if I could show you, I'd show you places immortals live outside a Sierra. They make the Dyson Spheres look like outhouses, but that's another time. Why can't I see them? Unfortunately, there are places you cannot go, and things you cannot do. If you saw the homes of certain immortals, you'd die, and all of this would change. You can't do or see certain things because they might create a conflict with free will. God would never allow such a conflict. You are an anomaly. You're not supposed to be here, but God gave you a message, and I believe God wanted you to understand it. What better way than to show you? Are you real, Jack? Are you a figment of my imagination? That's an odd question. I and everyone else is as real as you can get. I'm not sure how it works. We are living the lives we'd be living if this were all true. We've been living this life for 200 years. If things go as expected, based on the current possibilities, you will make many of the decisions you have already, and Sierra will exist. With exceptions, you and I'll never have this conversation. You will not have come to Sierra, and it would have remained a powerful dream remembered by you only. Hopefully, you will get the message out about your dreams of heaven. I assume it will be in the form of a book. Who besides Dana, Bart, and you know what has happened to me? Your family knows something has taken place, but they don't know the full extent of your situation. There are others I've told. I've communicated bits of information to them so they won't freak out when they see you. Even for me, it's a complicated matter of you being here. I can imagine only God could pull this off. All I can say is it boggles my mind. That was a lot to think about. So, I sat quietly, eating my burger. Can I go outside, Sierra? No, you can't go outside, Sierra. I suspect we will have this conversation several times. Remember, this is only a potential future. If you saw something on the earth from the future, that would end your adventure here, and your story would end up incomplete. This is your perfect heaven. God designed this place and time for you. Others like you might have an original idea and expectation, a different dream. I can say it's the Father's will to give us the desires of our heart. Jeff, your story will inspire others to imagine their own Sierra, their own place in heaven. We will not be waiters standing around, waiting for God to order something. We will be free to follow our dreams. Our dreams will encompass so much more in heaven than on earth. What was God in the beginning? He was a creator, and He created us in His image. If this all comes true, millions will live in Sierra or other places like it. Believe me when I say you don't even have a clue how important that is. Wow. I wanted to know more but, again, I kept quiet. It was a lot to take in, and I became too afraid to ask too many more questions. I ate my burger and stared out the window. Across the street was a busy square full of people. A band was playing, and everyone was standing or sitting on the ground watching them. Kids were racing around like pinballs in a pinball machine, bumping off of anything in their way, including other people. I noticed sitting at the table beside us were 3 young women talking among themselves. A young redhead sitting by the window was explaining to the others, "When I was 10, my father kicked me out of the house. My mother was in jail for selling drugs, and he too was a drug addict. I hated being home, anyway. I lived on the streets for over a year, begging and stealing anything I could to get money to buy food. At night, men always offered me a place to stay if I would have sex with them. I heard about God, and one night it got so bad I kneeled right on the street corner, as people were passing me by, and prayed for God to help me. A mentally ill homeless woman who thought I was trying to steal her property murdered me the following day. She dropped a small blanket, and I picked it up to give it back to her, contrary to what I usually would have done. As I was handing it to her, she pulled a knife and stabbed me several times. I blacked out, and the next thing woke up surrounded by angels. Now, I was eavesdropping and ignoring everything else as the conversation tugged at my heart. The girl to her left told her story. Yeah, I remember those days too, going through the landfill looking for food with my two sisters. We slept in the bushes next to the landfill. Both of our parents died in a car accident. One day a police officer came to our door. We hid because we had been home alone for 3 days. The neighbor talked with the officer. We overheard the officer telling the neighbor how both of our parents were drunk. They crashed over an embankment, killing them both. The neighbor said nothing about me and my sisters. I wanted to shout at the police officer, but I was too afraid. My sisters and I were alone from that point on. We had no one else, no aunts or uncles, and our grandparents from both parents died years earlier. I was only 6, and my sisters were 3 and 4 years old. She continued to explain how that she and her sisters ended up living at a landfill, and about a young girl who offered them some donuts, and salvation. One day we decided to return to our house to see if anyone lived there. While on our way, we passed a girl out playing in her yard. We stopped to watch her when she came over to us. She was my age, and she could tell we were hungry. So, she ran into the house and came out with a plate of stale donuts. Everyone was having a hard time then. Those donuts, although hard and dry, were probably important to her family. We sat and talked for a while as we ate those old donuts when, out of the blue, she asked us if we knew Jesus. We didn't. So, she told us who he was. She told us we needed him as our savior. After a while, she prayed with us, and we accepted Jesus as our savior. We didn't know what we were doing, but it didn't matter. Because of her kindness towards us, we believed her. We stayed in her front yard until she had to go into the house. It was too late to walk to our house, so we returned to the landfill. I looked over her way to see her looking at one of the other girls as she told her story, confident the other young lady was the girl in the front yard. She continued, that night a dump truck crushed me and my sisters while we were asleep. I guess the driver didn't notice us and we didn't realize we were so close to the road. Briefly, there was a loud noise, then we woke up in a crowd of people. We were just thrilled to be together. Her story grabbed my attention. She turned, and I looked at her as she looked at me. It has only been a short period since I saw her. I recognized the little girl's face, dirty, deathly thin, standing in the middle of a landfill with her sisters. How could I forget? I remember you. She answered, I remember you too. Fancy meeting you here after all this time. Last time I saw you I was standing in a landfill and you reached down, and then you disappeared. I still remember the look on your face. That was over 200 years ago. What an amazing story you and your friend just told. What story are you talking about? Your friend's story of living on a street corner, and you living in the landfill. Oh, we were talking about where to go next. We are on a shopping trip and stopped here for lunch. I said nothing about the landfill. Amazingly, I listened to the entire conversation. Yet, none of them had that conversation. I realized I had heard the whole thing in my head only. I didn't say any more about it. Instead, I asked, where are your sisters? Both are on the earth working in Jerusalem today. I'm visiting my best friend. She pointed to the same girl and smiled. The 3 girls got up to leave. I stood up and faced her. She stepped close and hugged me, and I hugged her back before she turned to leave with her friends. I whispered, goodbye, I hope we meet again. I hoped so. We will make it happen. Then she walked away. What's your name? I shouted as she exited through the door. Helen Hayes, she shouted back. After watching them walk away into the distance, I turned to Jack and said, what lovely young ladies. I hope even if it's just for their sakes, my story has meaning. Even if it's only one person, it would all be worth it, Jeff. I want to see Jerusalem, particularly the temple. Jack shook his head and laughed at me. He understood what I was going through. After our conversation, I still had a lot to consider, but Jack would not allow me to stay introverted. As soon as our conversation became silent, Jack got a funny expression on his face. Do you realize what time of year it is? Come on. Let's go. I didn't know what he meant, but when he got up to leave, I followed. As soon as we were through the door, he called for transport. Next thing we were standing at the end of a walkway leading up to a covered porch. We were standing behind a gate at the end of the walkway. It was cold and overcast. I could sense the cold, and the air smelled just like it should before it snows. The house at the end of the walkway was painted green with a great brown wooden front door. It looked like a barn with a covered porch wrapped around it. All the trees, except for the evergreens, displayed their full fall fashion. The mountains behind the house looked like a peacock's tail with all of its colors, gold, red, yellow, gray, and brown against an evergreen background. Can one even capture or paint such a masterpiece? I would say it was impossible. I stood there staring until Jack spoke. Perhaps he spoke twice as I don't think I heard him the first time. Welcome to Holiday. He grabbed me by the arm and pulled me up to the door. I remembered Holiday. We gave the planet the name Holiday because of its seasons, which were a constant reminder of the holidays. It had the most wonderfully distinct seasons in Sierra. Not only did most of the trees change colors annually, the evergreen trees growing there bloomed in the spring, and again in the late autumn. Each of them grew bulbs, cones, on the end of their branches, which resembled colorful Christmas ornaments. I realized this was George and Beth's house, and I was beside myself, being excited about what lay ahead. This was one of the longed-for moments of my dreams. Every year, in November, I came and stayed for a couple of months. I've been coming for almost 200 years. Wow. Jack knocked, and an older woman answered with an excited look on her face. She hugged me and said, "Hi, hun." "Hi, Mom," I said for some odd reason. "I have been expecting you. Come on in." As we entered the greeting room, just inside the door, she stared at me, and then hugged me again, tightly. She treated me like I was important to her, perhaps a relative who she had not seen for a long time. I became happy at the moment. I halfway knew what was going on. George is out back in the barn. He's cleaning the stalls for the Snowites. And then, she asked, when is the rest of the family coming? Jack answered, I am not sure. Should be any day now, I assume. She stared at me as if I should have answered. Obviously, she saw the confusion on my face. She turned to Jack. Is this what you told me about? Yes, it is. Apparently, she was one of those others Jack mentioned. He already informed her of my situation. I was wondering how many people he has informed of my situation. I should be happy as I guess he saved me hours of explaining. All right, I'll go get George. Sit down and make yourselves comfortable, boys. She directed us towards a small den to the right, and she left to get George. I know Jack fits in here somewhere. I wasn't sure where. He wasn't my brother or a relative that I remembered. Jeff, do you remember Beth and George? Yes, I do, but I expected them to look younger. You don't remember them that well then? Did you forget they're mortal? They still age like other mortals. Besides, wouldn't it be awkward if they looked our age? Do you remember when you first met them? Yes, I do. I continued as the memories filled my head. I recall I was attending a meeting in Commerce when I heard stories of a couple still living on board one section of the spaceport above Academy. Someone found them in the last section of the ring, before they moved it. I felt compelled to go over to the port and check it out myself. I found them wandering around. Both had been the 3 months after the last group of families moved on to Academy. Once I met them, I couldn't send them back to Earth. So I offered them a place to live here on holiday. They became part of my family. The rest is history. Yep, that's it. I guess you do remember. Jack, I remember something else. I remember I always brought tomatoes and squash I purchased from the farmer, Eugene. I was always the first one here, and Beth always made me tomato soup and toasted cheese sandwiches the night before Thanksgiving. That's right. We celebrate Thanksgiving. Wow. The memories were flooding my head. I had to pause, gather myself and put all the fresh memories into perspective. I now remembered, every time I visited, it was like I was living my childhood again. My whole family came every year. I knew I belonged here, although this time, everything seemed new, more exciting. After I finished going over the details with Jack, an older gentleman came walking into the small den. "Hi boys," he said, smiling. I said, "Hi, Dad." At that moment, I felt like I had been away for a long time, and I just came home. As soon as George said that, I almost broke down. It was like I wanted my dad to hold me and make me feel all right. My condition was overwhelming, and I needed him to let me know it would be okay. I grabbed him and held on. "I love you too, son." Just then, Beth shouted, "Come and see. The snow is falling." She was so excited it drew all of us to the window. The snow always fell in late fall, any day between November 15th and the 18th. It never failed. George said, "Snow means the snow ice will be down from the mountains today. I need to finish up the stalls." He looked at me and Jack and left the room, leaving back the way he came. Beth told Jack, she assumed because of my situation, he should show me my room so I could get settled in. Apparently, Jack has stayed here before, but I didn't remember. Jack motioned me to follow him. We returned to the entryway and went upstairs. The stairs climbed halfway up to a landing, splitting into two opposite directions. On either side were long hallways with 5 doors on both sides, bedrooms. We took the stairs to the right. As we walked down the hallway, Jack pointed to the second door on the right and said, "There's your room." He continued 2 doors down and pointed. "This is my room." My door opened to a nice-sized bedroom with a king-size 4-poster bed in the middle of the wall to the left. A closet to my right covered the whole wall and ended at the door of the bath. The bath was huge with a nice tiled shower. A small table and chairs were set up for sitting near a window where I could see the snow falling fast and heavy outside. The room had the aroma of cedar. It made me comfortable. Jack walked in and over to the closet to open the doors. It was full of clothes, shoes, coats, and sweaters, funky-looking sweaters. He pointed to the sweaters and said, "These are mine." Afterward, he directed my attention to the rest of the clothes. "Those are yours and will fit you nicely." He quickly exited the room laughing. "Don't you knock!" I shouted. I became introspective at the moment, excited at seeing the room. Until now, I only dreamed of it. It was so familiar and so new at the same time. I walked to the window to look out. The snow was coming down hard as it already covered the ground. The house had a side yard with a small patch of 10 to 12-foot evergreens. I noticed they were now half white from the snow and in full bloom with many colored ornaments. Each looked so wintry and holiday-like. On the other side of the yard was a stone half-round cul-de-sac with a high glowing lamppost in the middle. I couldn't imagine why it was there, although it was nice to see all the snow lit up all around the light. On the other side of the cul-de-sac was another house with a yard on this side. I could see 2 adults playing with several kids in the fresh fallen snow in their yard. They were magically lit up by the lamppost. I took a long shower and changed my clothes. An hour later, Jack knocked on the door. "Jeff, let's go downstairs. Your family is here." Once downstairs, we were greeted by a mob of people. I was ecstatic to see my kids, along with their kids. What caught my attention was Sophie. When I last saw her, she was 9 years old. Now, here she was all grown up. My other kids were as I remembered them, and the grandkids were all grown up too. They were the last of my line. I was grateful all of them got saved before the Great War. Sophie ran up to give me a bear hug. Another knock came at the door. Beth opened it to find 3 young women standing there. Once the young women walked in, I knew it was Jack's wife on Earth with his 2 daughters, followed by a dozen children. This was the first time I've seen Jack's wife carry all his daughters since I have come here. Even though I remembered nothing about Jack, oddly, I knew they were married back on Earth. People who remained married on Earth when they died, or raptured, were no longer married but had a special relationship with their earthly spouse. How weird I should remember such about Jack. Both of Jack's kids adopted children right after the tribulation. So, both Diane and Barbara were each escorting half a dozen great-great-grandchildren. I thought, how perfect. This time of year was such a wonderful time for children. I recognized a few faces of the kids, but none of their names. Two of the older ones came up and hugged me, as did both Diane and Barbara, and I felt close to them. When the greetings were over, everyone went to their rooms to get settled in. Later, we met in the dining room, to the left of the entryway, where we all sat at a huge table. Beth brought out several pitchers of fresh drinks and hot chocolate, with a platter of homemade cookies of various kinds. We sat and talked, drank coffee, cocoa, and ate cookies into the evening. I learned more about myself, about the person I was before my transformation. Everybody offered a little knowledge of my situation before coming to Sierra. Everyone, except Jack, asked me several follow-up questions, what I remembered or not. Of course, they didn't know everything that was taking place and humored me. I explained, based on my dreams, I only had a sketchy idea of the other me and Sierra. We all wondered how long I'd be here. Each one had their opinion. As we sat talking, George came in from outside and said, "The Snowites are here. I have hooked them up to the sleds. Who wants to go into town?" George was always accommodating. George and Beth were a unique people in their time. Each always considered others before themselves. They survived the tribulation as part of a Christian commune in the forest along the Snake River, between Idaho and the Oregon Cascades. Both nearly starved to death several times, but God always came through for them. George was a rancher in eastern Oregon until the government forcibly took his livestock. What could they do against the government? They went to live where no one could find them. Both assumed the government might come looking for them. George created a nasty ruckus with the federal agents who took his livestock. They felt forced into hiding. So, they sought shelter with a Christian commune, living in the woods for over 5 years. George told me how one time he got into a wrestling match with a black bear. George could not have weighed over 170 pounds, dressed soaking wet. Because he was a rancher, he was unusually strong from all the hard work. The bear weighed at least 400 pounds, he'd say, as he gave a glance to Beth to see if she was listening. He came out of nowhere. I had no choice but to fight. So, I jumped on his back, like riding a bronco. I can break any horse. I kept riding while driving my hunting knife into his back. He threw me off and ran away. I did the natural thing. I took off running in the opposite direction. The next day a group of us went looking for him. We found him right outside his den. He was dead, and it made me sad, but he fed us for 2 weeks. Beth laughed at his stories. I wasn't sure if she was laughing because she knew he was exaggerating or she remembered with him. Either way, she loved him unconditionally. George and Beth Hansen met when George came storming out of a grocery store only to run Beth, holding her groceries, over. He kept staring at her, which annoyed her. She had many suitors because she was the prettiest girl in the small town of Ontario, Oregon. She stood 5'6" with short brown curly hair and emerald green eyes, and wouldn't have anything to do with George at first. He took 6 years of relentless persuasion to win her heart. So, we got on our warm coats. Beth gave me a blue heavy pea coat as she walked out the front door. Waiting at the end of the walkway were 2 sleds attached to 2 huge pure white Clydesdales. The horses spent most of their time up in the high mountains. Most of them were pure white and quite large, being aptly named Snowites. The horses stayed up in the mountains until the first snow dropped in the valley. At which time, they came down to the valley and stayed until spring. Most of the residents owned at least a couple. All the houses in the small township of Christmas built a barn with stalls set up for them. George had 2 Snowites. He released them at the end of winter, sending them back up into the mountains only to return with the next snowfall. We got in the sleds, and 2 of George's companions took us into town. After 2 miles down the road, Jack looked at me and said, "Welcome to Christmas, Jeff." Christmas, is it Christmas? Well, welcome to the town Christmas. We came to a stop at a long hitching post, got out, and walked down a path towards the corner of a stone building or workshop. On the other side of the road, from where we tied the horses, were several small workshops, more of them as we got closer to town. The shops reminded me of a small German or Scandinavian village I've seen in vacation magazines. All the lights in the shops shined dimly yellow, lighting handmade displays in the windows. The snow was piled up to the display windows of the small buildings. I thought, if this was the town of Christmas, those shops looked like Christmas cards. We turned the corner to the right and walked on a wide wooden plank-covered walkway. It appeared to go on for at least 3/4 of a mile. The walkway turned to the left at the end. Gift shops, restaurants, with sitting areas lined the walkway from one end to the other. People casually sat, talking, eating donuts, drinking hot chocolate, coffee, hot apple cider, and a host of other items filling the air with a sweet aroma. The small town was in the shape of a horseshoe, as was the walkway. In the middle of town was a lake. The town turned it into an ice skating rink for winter. It was busy with adults and children skating. Teenagers were chasing each other through a band of evergreens protruding out of the ice near its edges. In the middle of the lake was a tall, maybe 50-foot lighted Christmas tree. Anyway, it looked like one. Groups of adults with their families were skating around it. Couples and their children were sitting on small benches near it. A dozen angels were standing next to it facing the boardwalk, playing the most impressive music, singing the most inspirational songs. When it comes to Christmas, I don't have an opinion. I didn't complain to anyone who celebrated it or didn't celebrate it back on Earth. I must say, the music and the singing were such it made me think Christmas was in the air, songs about Christ and his birth. We walked around before stopping to have dinner at a small outdoor restaurant, all of us rejoicing in the music. After dinner, we ordered more hot coffee, green tea, and, of course, hot chocolate for the kids. I enjoyed some hot apple cider. We headed back to the house late at night. At which time, the family retired except me. I hugged and said goodnight to the kids. It seemed so natural. I went to my room and sat down by the window to watch the snow fall around the lamppost. I found 2 small candles along with matches laying on the nightstand beside the bed. So, I lit them and placed one on the table next to me and the other on a small table next to the window. The shadows their light inspired danced slowly, silently, hypnotic around the room. I could hear nothing but a whisper of my own thoughts in the quietness. As I gazed out the window, I was drawn to the halo of white illuminated flakes falling around the lamppost. I questioned myself again, whether this was real. How could it be real? I imagined my family, all of them, and how each one fit in. How we continued to gather for the holidays. We would meet one another at the front door, hugging and kissing one another, the smell of pumpkin pie in the air, in the den a lit fire with a comfortable couch for us to sit on. I could see the flicker of the light from the fireplace randomly exposing smiles from wide-eyed kids goofing off. I could never have imagined such an ideal way to live. A tear came to my eye. It rolled down my face and fell onto my shirt. I wondered how I could love them so much. In my peaceful surroundings, I contemplated such important things, being caught between the reality of my heart and the magical scene I was looking at just outside the window. I was sensing turmoil, peace, and pain at the same time. Regardless, every moment spent on holiday was important. Eventually, I lost track of time. We had Thanksgiving dinner, which was surprising. I was excited that anyone still celebrated the holiday. It was nice as I felt right at home. We took many trips in the sled to different places, landmarks, resorts, and shopping malls. We had fun, snowboarding, skiing, sledding, and hiking. Holiday was a skier's paradise. We tried to go everywhere and do everything we could. Officially, no other vehicles were allowed on the paths in the town of Christmas, except the sleds. So, most of the resorts outside Christmas were accessible by transportation vehicles. Sled rides are fun, but they can be cold. When we stayed home, we gathered around, talking and laughing. We played outside in the snow. The kids drank lots of hot chocolate. Jack and his family were such an important part of this holiday. So was I. I still didn't understand where Jack fit in. I said nothing, nor spoke about it to anyone, and I was grateful he and his family were there. One time I mentioned to Jack, "This has to be heaven. It's for me, Jeff. There's nothing better." We stayed there for at least 2 months. The time passed by so fast, I couldn't imagine we stayed there for so long. We hugged each other as we left. Although the kids were coming over once a month for Sabbath, we talked and promised to do one thing or another, together until next year. Too often we said similar things on Earth, but nothing ever came of it. I fully expected that would change if I were around much longer. We said our goodbyes and headed home,